The chair for the first panel is Marjolein de Boer, and who will be introducing the speakers.
Okay. So welcome to the first panel, titled Muzzled Voices of Parenthood. And we have four very interesting speakers that are going to start today. And the first one is Robert Blackwood, who's from the University of Liverpool in the UK. And he's going to talk about father's perspective. And the title of his presentation is The Muffling and Vocalizing of Traditionally Dominant Voices from a Father's Perspective.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you also to Christina and to Kelly for organising this today and for the invitation to come. At first glance, it probably seems it certainly does to me, a bit incongruous to start a day on parenthood and family life with a man's voice talking about the muffling of it. And I sort of try to think through the sort of the contradictions in this, the tensions there. And I think they're actually quite useful in trying to sort of signal the challenges that I felt talking through this. These are going to be a set of emerging ideas around what it means to be silenced, to voice, especially from the perspective of fathers. In the day that's supposed to sort of challenge, as we've just heard, some of the sort of the preconceived ideas about what family life means and what it doesn't do, I wouldn't want anything that I talk about now to be construed as some kind of complaint. That sort of the irony would not be lost on anybody here about a man standing up saying, "It's not fair. This is a complaint of mine." So what I don't want you to do is think that in some ways I am lamenting what I'm going to talk about as some kind of muffling or muzzling around that. What I've done, though, has been very much influenced by Rebecca Solnit's 2017 work, The Mother of All Questions, where she tries to think through what she calls future feminisms. And although this was only sort of printed last year, the end of last year, in the light of all the range of scandals that we're aware of, such as Me Too, Time's Up, paid discrimination, the BBC, all these kind of things, the issues she raises are ripe for revisiting now already. My own position is invariably coloured by my own positionality. So as a white, middle-class, middle-aged man, mine is normally the kind of voice that is not silenced. Mine is the kind of voice that is normally always heard. And I argue that to a certain extent it isn't silenced fully, and that's why I go for the term of muffling, this idea of somehow covering up the sound, reducing its loudness, but the voice is still heard, the voice is still there. And so one of the more pertinent points I want to think about is the ways in which this, who is the agent, who is doing the muffling, who's doing the silencing, we're going to talk about that. And Solnit talks about how silence is distinct from quietness. Silence is imposed, silence is repressive, and she goes even as far as to talk about silence being the universal condition of oppression. But one of the first tensions I'd like to look at is the idea of this self-imposed nature of silence around fatherhood. And again, this is highly personalised. This is my own experience, heavily coloured by my social class. Of course, I'm British, so that's a big thing. My geographic background, my age, so on and so forth. It's not necessarily a universal experience, certainly not necessarily a dominant perspective in the West or in the North or amongst the middle classes or amongst middle-aged men. But this self-imposed silence is in some ways a corrective, part of the ongoing corrective to the dominance of men's voices to the point of exclusion of women in conversation that persisted for millennia. The BBC television series called The Midwife traces the life, as you can see, of a group of midwives who live with a community of Anglican nuns, most of whom were also midwives, in post-war East London. Originally set in the 1950s, the series has become so incredibly popular that it's extended beyond the original book that it was written on, and we're now in the 7th series, and we've got up to 1963. And the role of fathers in the process of parenthood, from planning through to childcare, is presented once a week back to the British public, often with a knowing wink, because viewers smile as the bossy midwives and the wise nuns lightly dismiss the possibility that a father could play any part in the process of childcare after the moment of conception and until well after delivery. So pregnant women arrive for antenatal classes accompanied by their mothers, not by the fathers of the as yet unborn baby. Mothers-to-be attend antenatal classes with other pregnant women. And there's often a sort of touch of humour derived from the fact that there may be a solitary husband who's been bounced into attending by his wife, or usually wife, but occasionally partner, into one of these classes. And an episode from a couple of weeks ago, the nuns and the midwives over dinner one evening discussed the idea that one of the enlightened nuns proposes to encourage fathers-to-be to attend these antenatal classes. And the discussion and the response is encouraged by the viewers to dismiss the conservative approach that's voiced by some of the characters, that this is women's business, and that the man should in fact be encouraged to participate. And although it's not articulated as such, motherhood is presented, at least to Sunday evening television viewers in the UK, as the last domain where power, where agency rests firmly within the hands of women. So my personal reflection on this, especially in the light of prominent discussions around the discrimination against women, is that this corrective on the part of men to silence themselves in some ways around the issues of parenthood can be seen as an attempt by some, but not all, as the active transfer of power back to women, back to the mother in this case. Now this redistribution of power is clearly a welcome one with which few could disagree, but there are other aspects that we possibly need to consider. It's bell hooks who gets us to think about what the patriarchy says about this. The patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. In other words, the self-perpetuating patriarchy demands that men, and in the case of what we're thinking about today, fathers or would-be fathers, silence themselves. And this silencing isn't so much of their voices, as we know. Patriarchy doesn't ever suggest that men are quiet, but this is more the silencing, the suppression of emotions. This, to paraphrase Hooks, is the emotional self-mutilation of men whose roles within family life and within parenthood are very tightly defined, that categorised as strength and pride, self-control and leadership within this. So from the earliest antenatal check onwards, the convention has become that the future father assumes the roles that might not be ones for which he feels suited or with which he's comfortable, but ones with which new traditions, not the traditions of 1963 Call the Midwife, position him. So how I nuance this then is the extent to which we've got more or less the repositioning rather than the complete elision, rather than the complete silencing of emotions. There are acceptable emotions for fathers in this, of strength, of supportiveness, of consistency, which are quite appropriate in a number of circumstances, but which are not necessarily universals and will offer fairly limited scope for the variation that characterises human existence. Now, whilst acknowledging that this is a very personalised, the nature of this response, there is evidence to suggest that it is in some way shared, if not quite universalised. Work on men who are involved or excluded from discussions around their partner's termination has pointed to the surrendering of rights and consequently the silencing of emotions by men. So Michael Simon, a US psychologist who contributed to a recent BBC Radio 4 documentary that is still available to listen to, about men whose partners terminate a pregnancy without involving the man in the decision-making process. And he notes, as you can see, if they have ambivalent feelings or different feelings to their partner, to be a good man, which is the thing I'd like to just stress, they will not talk about their experiences in order to provide care and attention, or at least not to detract from the care and attention placed on their partners. Now this emphasis on the being of a good man returns to the ideas of these sort of socially prescribed representations of 21st century manhood, where with good intentions men marginalise their own feelings in order to support their partner, but possibly to the detriment of their own well-being. And this extends beyond the more thorny issue of abortion into other other domains of family lives, such as miscarriage. So almost a year before the safe delivery of my now 4-year-old son, my wife miscarried at 7 weeks. And whilst the loss is shared and recognised within our marriage between us, miscarriage in wider society is very much framed as a female experience. And obviously at one level the physical realities of miscarriage are experienced by a woman, and it is right that care and attention is paid to those individuals who go through the physical experience of miscarriage. Inevitably, the physicality of this kind of experience distinguishes her from the emotional responses from that of her partner. But at the same time, society finds itself in a position where men's emotions around this are very much quieted in order to focus better on the grieving woman. And just a couple of weeks ago, so all very sort of contemporary, on the 13th of January, just less than a month ago, the Guardian, the UK Guardian, carried an article, an anonymous article, by a man who already has one child, but whose wife now repeatedly miscarries the fetus. So there is this very much this live debate about trying to revoice part of the discussion that there has been in some ways, and I keep sort of stressing this, for good reasons in some way muffled, but possibly also needs to be addressed. So how do I draw all this together very quickly? As with many questions, power is at the stake of what I've tried to be alluded to here. As Call the Midwife demonstrates, there's a perception that agency is concentrated in the hands of women, although I'm personally under no illusion that that covert power isn't exercised by men in a lot of these debates here, so that's not what I'm arguing, and it has been done for millennia. But where the muffling of continues is in what Bell Hooks refers to as this emotional self-mutilation. The taboo amongst men on articulating fear, sorrow and anxiety, and the widely shared trope of a good man, a good father, for good reasons, perpetuates this muffling of men's voices. The question now arises, and I hope may be part of our discussion today, is how and where men can counter this emotional self-mutilation with no detriment to women. Thank you all very much.
To the second speaker, which is Orna Donnet. I would like to invite you to the floor. She's a Post-doctoral Fellow at the Ben Gurion University of Negev in Israel. And she's going to talk about the politics of reproduction and emotions, and the question, what can we learn from the social denial of regretting motherhood? So.
That I think that there are women who someday wake up and say, I will not be a mother, and they know it about themselves. I will say, as you situated yourself, I will situate myself as well, that I'm one of them. And when I was 16, I heard my friends saying that they will be mothers and they will have 3 children and their names will be this and that and that. And I said to myself, that's strange. This is not my dream. I don't want to be a mother. I can't imagine myself being a mother. And it became my subject of study in my thesis. I'm a sociologist, and I studied the unwillingness of women and men in Israel who do not want to be a parent, and the unwillingness of them to be parents. And of course, there are many ways to remain non-parents, but one of them is, it is a decision, and it's not because of the circumstances or the conditions. I spoke to so many women, and me among them, that even if you will give me all the conditions that I need, and quite frankly, I do have all the conditions that I need to be good enough mother, I just don't want to be a mother. So this is another aspect of it, and I think that both of my studies are talking about women who want to remain nobody's mom. My first study was about women who don't want to be mothers, and the second study in my PhD was about women who look back and understand that they have made a mistake when they became mothers. They regret becoming mothers. And my book was published about it in a few countries, so I heard from women from different countries, not only Israel, about the thought that if I had the experience and knowledge that I have today, I wouldn't have become a mother. I also spoke to 10 in Israel. I interviewed 10 men who regret becoming fathers, but I needed to, because there was a length restriction, I wrote only about women and mothers, but I also met fathers who regret. And one of the things that I will say here is that I'm not interested in talking about why they regret that they became mothers. I want to talk about what regretting motherhood might tell us about ourselves as a society. I think it's more important. I'm a sociologist. I didn't want to learn about the personality, and I don't want to, of course, to look at it from a pathological aspect. I think that regretting motherhood tells a social story, and this is what, and a political story, and this is what I was interested about. And I started my study because what you said before, I heard so many women, me among them, who are being threatened by regret in order to become mothers. We are being told, you will surely regret it. We are being promised that we will regret it. And of course, and I also met women at their 70s who do not regret it. So what I'm trying to say is that, of course, there are women who regret that they didn't become mothers, but there are also women who regret becoming mothers, and society binarically makes a distinguish between women who are not mothers will surely regret it, that's for sure, and there is no other option, and a silence regarding the option that women might regret becoming mothers. So this is the first thing that I want to challenge, this binary distinction, and to start voicing the sayings of women who regret. And it's very interesting to learn, and I already 15 years I'm studying both of these cases, and it's really interesting to understand that society tends to deny that regretting motherhood exists. We are being told, stop saying bullshit, you're just having a rough period, you will see when the children will grow up, you will get over it. Maybe you are an ambivalent mother, but there is no way that you totally regret it. And as I said, I met women who are saying it was a mistake, we shouldn't have done it. And society denies the option that women will regret it. And it's quite interesting because regret is one of the human emotional stances that we experience following so many things in our lives. If I would list now all the things that we regret about them, why did I study this? Why didn't I study this? Why did I marry him or her? Why I didn't marry him or her? Why we separated? Why we didn't separate? Why I made this tattoo? Why I made this tattoo here and not there? Why? And so many things. We will stay here until tomorrow morning if I will list all the things that we regret about. And we just can see the option that women, we are being told in order to, society uses emotion in a political way, in order to align us into motherhood. And one of the things we are being told, one of the things is you will regret if you will not become a mother. And the other things we are being told that we are being, like, in a very good way, that motherhood will change our lives. Well, yes, motherhood might indeed change our lives, and this is why there might be women who will look back and say this change was not for the best for us. It did not brought with it what we were promised that we will bring with it. And since regret is one of the human emotional stances, it's really interesting that society denies the options that it will happen to women. And we are freaking out from this possibility. And I think that when we agree to listen to what these mothers are saying, we can learn from them several things. First of all, about this denial. First of all, the way society treats motherhood as, and I'm saying a really banal thing, I don't know if banal, there is a word, that this is the natural course, and this is natural for each and every one of us to be a mother. And therefore, when a woman says that she regrets becoming a mother, It's like I will say I regret that blood is running through my veins. It's something that's supposed to be so natural, so how can I regret something that it is natural? And of course, it's not natural to all of us. It's social saying that it is natural for each and every one of us. It is being considered that since we have the same biological organs, it codes this biological, it's a biological destiny, and it encodes for all of us the same dreams, yearnings, needs, abilities, disabilities. Like if we are all being treated as females, then all of our dreams should be the same, all of our needs should be the same, and all of our abilities should be the same. And of course, this is not the case, but we are being told that this is the thing. So the denial of regret is coming from this perception that you can't regret something that's supposed to be natural to you. Like I regret breathing. It doesn't make sense. But of course, if we consider motherhood as social and as political, the institution of motherhood, as Adrian Reed said, so we can start hearing these voices. Another thing that this denial tells us is that we live in a society, and it's like a capitalist society, neoliberal society, industrial society that treat time as linear, and it's all of it is a matter of time. You will find later on, if not now, later on, it will be all right. It is just a matter of time. It is just a matter of time until you will want to be a mother. It is just a matter of time until you feel comfortable as a mother. And I think postnatal depression is one of the examples of silencing voices of women who are saying something that is not, as we were being told, that immediately we will fall in love with our babies. But postnatal depression is still in the same rigid perception about time, that it will take half a year, 3 years, 5 years, and eventually you will feel comfortable in being a mother. And these women who are regretting motherhood, 5 of them are already grandmothers, so they are already 30, 40 years mothers. They have their own experience. It's not the first years that might be chaotic, and they are sitting there for a long time. They are telling us no. There are women that for them it's not a matter of time. It is not happening, and one of the panics around what they are saying is because they are breaking this linear story, because they are not supplying to us the happy ending and the catharsis that it will be all right. They are saying no. For us, we look back even from the distance of 40 years, and we understand that for us it was not worthwhile. For us it was not worthwhile, and this is really something that it's hard to understand for society. I have only a few minutes, so I will... Okay. Another thing is that I think that mothers are being treated... one of the reasons for this denial is that mothers are being treated as objects, as a thing that need to supply the needs to others, and are not treated as subjects. And motherhood is treated as a role and as a job, and I would like to treat it as an intersubjective relationship. And if we treat motherhood as an intersubjective relationship, and we need to remember that it is with a person that we don't know. We are getting involved with a person we don't really know who she or he will be, then we might understand why women also might regret it, because in relationships, human relationships, we do things, we make mistakes, we can't take everything under consideration in the present and only later on we understand things. So if we see motherhood as an intersubjective relationship, we might understand why women in retrospect are saying it, for us it was a mistake. There are so many other things to say. I just started, I'm teaching a course about it for a whole semester, and even in a whole semester I'm not getting there. So maybe we'll continue later on with questions, and thank you for listening.
I'll invite Kellie to the floor, Kellie Gonçalves, if I pronounce it okay. She's a Post-doctoral Fellow at the Center for Multilingualism in Society Across the Lifespan here in Oslo. And she's going to talk about, or at least the title of her presentation is Being a Mom Isn't All It's Cracked Up to Be, the Challenges of Motherhood in the 21st Century.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks very much for being here. And today, as has already been said, I'll be talking about the challenges of motherhood in the 21st century. And I'd also like to position myself. I do this as a privileged middle-class white American. I'm not an expert on motherhood by any means, but a novice mom. I have a 3-year-old child, a daughter, and I had her by means of a cesarean section. I was a stay-at-home mom for an entire year after my daughter's birth. I breastfed for 19 months, and staying home for an entire year, this was quite unconventional, where I was previously in Switzerland. And I faced several unpleasant and shocking reactions from work colleagues there, as well as internationally, about this particular decision. I've also, and I'm glad that Robert brought this up, experienced the trauma of a miscarriage, and I think this is a topic that also gets kind of shoved under the rug. So in the title of my talk, I've stated that being a mom isn't all it's cracked up to be, because personally, I don't think that it is. I'm 39 years old, and although I work in Oslo, my family lives in Austria, so I commute and engage in so-called part-time motherhood. And this is a point I'll come back to a little bit later. While I do not regret being a mother, it is by far the hardest thing I've ever done. A choice I consciously made, and a decision I'm very happy about, although I know that not every single parent, mother or father, feels the same way. And in her 2014 book entitled All Joy and No Fun, Jennifer Senior in fact found that parents are no happier than non-parents, and in certain cases are considerably less happy. So she accredits this to 3 main developments that have complicated the ways in which the experience of parenting has changed in the last few decades, and this is as a result of choice, our complicated working experiences, and also the redefinition of childhood. So these developments have all led to the redefinition of parenthood as well as motherhood within the 21st century, or what French feminist philosopher Elizabeth Badinter refers to and describes as a conflict, and how modern motherhood undermines the status of women and ultimately results in various setbacks to our personal freedom. Progressive motherhood is no doubt linked to liberal feminist ideologies, but for Angela McRobbie, a British sociologist, cultural theorist, and feminist, it is also connected to the neoliberal regime. So this is something that Orna touched upon, offering a distinctively gendered dimension to the mantra of individualism, the market and competition, as well as updating the now old-fashioned family values vocabulary associated with social conservatism. For her, female labor power is too important to the post-industrial economy for anyone to be advocating long-term stay-at-home wives and mothers. As more women enter the workforce from the mid-1970s onward, coupled with high divorce rates, having a career doesn't just provide women and didn't just provide women with an income and some form of independence, it also reduces the cost of welfare to the government. In 1975 in the US, 34% of women with children under the age of 3 were in the workforce. In 2010, this number increased to 61%. So while such figures may indicate that both women and men are responsible for bringing home the bacon, the majority of the domestic work, cooking, child rearing, cleaning, shopping, laundry, etc., is still done primarily by women. And according to some doctors, and also you've touched upon this, the desire to have children is not an innate biological quality that all women possess. But once I turned 30, people kept reminding me about the biological clock ticking. So apparently the countdown had started, and it was time to think about having a family. I had studied, worked, traveled, and even written a book, but the box entitled Motherhood was not yet ticked. Many of my friends at the time were childless by choice, given our relatively young age, or for altruistic reasons. The friends I did have with children were people I barely saw anymore, as our social circles had drastically changed since the birth of their offspring. Most of the women in my family had children biologically or through means of adoption, and it seemed like the most natural thing to do. And this is maybe a point we can come back to, this whole notion of natural. So, in fact, I was told by many people that this would be the best thing that I would ever do. So the moral and social pressure was by all means present, but there was also a part of me that dreamed about having the closest bond I'd apparently ever have to any other human being, and I really didn't want to miss out on this. The only problem at the time was that my partner, who was 12 years older, did not want to change his life. He was happy as it was. At the time, my own mother even asked me, "Kellie, do you really want to have children? Why not just enjoy your life?" I was really shocked and utterly confused that she said this, right? So how could my mother say such a thing? And I thought, didn't me and my sister contribute to her joy in life as a single divorced mom? So perhaps I was a bit naive, but maybe I was also a victim to the mediatized and glamorized mothers portrayed on TV, magazines, and billboards, right? So do we ever really see frumpy, exhausted women with children in the media? No, we don't. And my mom even warned me. She said, "Kellie, you will never sleep properly again. You will always worry. It doesn't matter how old your children are." She wasn't trying to stop me. I think she was just trying to be honest about the realities of what being a mom is like. So in terms of the media, and we all know this, we are presented with smiling, happy faces, images that equate happy and healthy children to happy, healthy, and let's not forget, slim, physically fit, beautiful, radiating women who are also mothers. And we've been fed this for quite some time. So this is an ad from the 1950s that reads, "A wise mother keeps her figure." You owe it to yourself and to your family to remain slim and young and lovely. It's so easy to keep a youthful figure. Yeah, okay. Now, we know how hard this is as mothers to even be able to get a half an hour to ourselves, depending on how many children we have. But it's also, no wonder that I was really quite perplexed by my own mother's words, which had clashed so drastically to the master script I had been inundated with my entire life that read, "To be a real woman was to be a mother." A simple message imbued with a powerful ideology that has been historically entrenched within Western society and continues to circulate throughout many countries of the world today. The message, of course, that does not get spread rapidly but has started is that becoming a mother means a loss of autonomy and independence. It is the loss of your old life, where a new life phase begins and is also completely reconfigured that absolutely no person, and no book for that matter, can actually prepare you for, despite what all these books are trying to tell us. As a first-time mom, you are headed into unknown territory. And regardless if you think you are well prepared, you aren't, simply because you cannot be. Despite all you've heard and read, many women still want to believe that it will be different with their own children, their own partners, and their own newly established families. And I know that I did too. In the US, the average age for college-educated women who are first-time mothers is 30 years old. In Norway, it's 29. So as a result, many couples stay together before they actually have children. And according to Senior, the consequence of this deferment is a heightened sense of contrast, the before versus after. These parents now have an exquisite memory of what their lives were like before their children came along. They spent roughly a decade on their own experimenting with different jobs, romantic partners, and living arrangements. For historian J.M. Roberts, the 20th century has spread as never before that the idea of human happiness is realizable. And for many women, happiness is equated with the idea of motherhood, or at least the choice to reproduce. For Senior, adults often view children as one of life's crown achievements, and they approach child rearing with the same bold independence and individuality that they would any other ambitious life project, spacing children apart according to their own needs and raising them according to their own individual child rearing philosophies. Such orchestrated planning has led Howarth to talk about the goddess myth, how a vision of perfect motherhood actually hurts mothers. This was a great story that came out in Time magazine in October of 2017, and what it showed was the realities and the social pressures, so from society members, but more importantly from medical doctors, about how women should have births, but also how they should breastfeed. So the do's and don'ts of breastfeeding. Despite some women's best intentions to do everything naturally, it doesn't always happen. So maybe you can't breastfeed and you have to pump. So here's a picture we often do not see very regularly, right? A woman pumping her breasts in order to feed her child her milk. For Badinter, the reverence for all things natural glorifies an old concept of the maternal instinct and applauds masochism and sacrifice, constituting a supreme threat to women's emancipation and sexual equality. And this is a point I hope that we get to discuss afterwards. Because all-consuming motherhood and excessive child-centeredness has led to the fictitious notion of the so-called super mom, right, who is able to do everything and juggle life, work. So currently, I engage in so-called part-time motherhood because I was not prepared to give up my career or to be a target of discrimination in the workplace, which both pregnant women and working mothers do experience. Maybe not so much in Norway, but this is definitely the case in many wealthy and industrialized countries where social welfare systems do not proper functionally and fail to support family systems for dual career couples. Being a part-time mom for me requires state provisions and a supportive network at home, which in my case includes relying on extended family members as well as an au pair. Like many jobs today, work continues long after the official workday is over, where mobile technology makes us ever present. Here we have a mom with 3 kids, a working mom with 3 kids. Go on. No, it's okay. As an academic, my job requires that I am mobile and to some extent even hypermobile. And this is a term that has emerged in sociology, also tourism studies. So sociological studies indicate that hypermobile lifestyles have shown individuals to suffer from high levels of anxiety, emotional disconnection, as well as psychological and social distress. These are some of the very high costs for many working mothers in the 21st century, especially for those following a career path who travel extensively. And we can see this being portrayed in the 2011 film, I Don't Know How She Does It. So because we don't have QuickTime, I have to come out of here and show this to you like that. All right. So just bear with me, please. Okay, so this I just wanted to show you, it's kind of, a comedy about the challenges of juggling a professional career with 2 children. Let me get back. All right. So as modern women, we want it all because we have been told that, in fact, if we work hard enough, we can have it all. Some people might claim that successful working mothers do have it all, but I would advocate that such women rarely have it all at the same time. Being a part-time mom no doubt allows me the freedom and independence of my old life, giving me the time to focus on my work and myself, and this is of course something that many full-time mothers and even working mothers do not get to do. But it has required me to step down as being the sole manager of our family, and this is also another neoliberal tactic. So this has meant that I have had to learn to let go and keep my mouth absolutely shut at times. And for any wife and any mother, we know that this can be quite hard to do. So it has also forced the reversal of traditional heteronormative gender roles in our family, which actually works quite well at times. At times it doesn't. And here you can see how this is also being portrayed, I'm not sure, yeah, in certain media contexts. So as a part-time mom, I do miss out on a lot of my daughter's life, her achievements, and certain milestones, but it has also made me learn to prioritize the ones that I am unwilling to forego. Of course, there are many rewards to being a mom, but being identified, and I think this is a point that you also touched upon, Orna, being identified first and foremost as a mother, or just a mother, I hate that, you're just a mother, can indeed be detrimental to any woman's sense of self. Allowing motherhood to define who women are is problematic because we have multiple facets to our sociocultural identities, and these of course also deserve recognition. Despite all of our worries, and for many mothers, and I think of Hannah, the chronic sleep deprivation that my own mother warned me about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we go on to the last speaker, Lanza. She's a professor here at the university and the director of the Center of Multilingualism in society across the lifespan. And she's going to talk about the challenges of transnational parents in contemporary globalized society.
So, first of all, thank you very much to the organizers. And as part of Multiling, I'm feeling very honored to be here to talk about this very important topic. I guess I should preface my comments or my talk by positioning myself as well. Yes, I'm a parent. I have 2 adult children, transnational parents, married to a Norwegian, been here many, many years. Privileged in a sense, come from the US, a Western country. At the same time, lots of the things that have been said from my previous speakers, the previous speakers here, resonate a lot with my own experience. And just because you're privileged doesn't mean that parenting is a piece of cake. That being said, I also would like to draw attention to other groups of parents that perhaps have even more challenges that we who come from privileged countries have when they come to a new country and exercise doing parenting. So, the seminar addresses family dreams when they go unrealized, being voluntarily or involuntarily childish in a society that tends to revolve around children. The dilemmas these individuals face also affects transnational parents. Indeed, transnational parents may feel even more pressured to reproduce in order to maintain a culture or language across a family, across generations. However, my talk is going to be less personal than the others that have come before me, and I'd like in my talk to focus on transnational parents, individuals who have children, and the challenges they face in a contemporary globalized society. As we'll see, they too are pressured by society, and even the very nature of their parenting can be scrutinized. With increased transnational migration in recent years, raising bilingual or multilingual children has become a widespread phenomenon as people cross borders, integrate into new cultural linguistic landscapes, form intermarriages and partnerships, and create multilingual families. The modern multilingual transnational family is just as diverse as monolingual families in a country. We have your typical nuclear family, we have LGBT families, we have single parent families, all of these just to show that the multitude of types of families resonate also with families within a particular country. There's a big variety. And here you see the French president with his newly acquired extended family. So then what's important, we've brought up the notion that a family is well situated within a society, and we can think of this of a family as a little social unit, a social cultural unit, a community of practice, we say, a social unit that has its own norms for speaking, acting, and believing, and hence provides a focus on practice or praxis. And that is the cornerstone for language socialization. I'd just like to point out that this is actually a field of study. The decision-making process of what languages to speak in the home is the subject of a field of research called family language policy. And it's just in the past 10 years that this field has really taken off with a focus within sociolinguistics, which is the field that I work in, sociolinguistics of multilingualism. And the family has increasingly received attention. Within this study, now I can point out that there's an increasing focus on social media. Using Facebook, with social media, we can talk online with loved ones abroad and engage in discussions in online forums, among other things. Virtual space allows us to engage in the intimacy or private space of the family without borders. And of course, we know the family, at least in traditional sociolinguistic research, the family is considered the most private of all domains, an intimate private domain. However, through mass media and open online fora, the family as a private space easily becomes a public space. So this switch from the family being a private space to a public space is what I'd like to focus on right now, and the ramifications and the challenges that brings to transnational families. The first one is I'd like to look at mediatized discourses on families, what we read about transnational families in the news, the online news media, and then to get into a topic that perhaps fits even very well with what Kellie talked about earlier on online parental blogging. All these blogs that tell us how to be a good parent. Just to argue that the family, the multilingual family, is also a public space. So let's talk first about mediatized discourse on families, and let's bring this home to Norway. New minorities in Norway. Do you know what the largest group of immigrants is? Let's see how up to date you are in your statistics. Any idea? Polish, yeah, there you go. And of course, since 2004. But what we see in this chart, this graph here from Statistics Norway, is that the Poles are indeed the largest group. However, the largest second generation is the group of those who have a Pakistani background, right? And that resonates with what, if those of you have been here, I've been here almost 40 years, about 40 years. And the Pakistanis started coming in. There were the first large group of immigrants coming into Norway in the 70s, right? So now let's turn to, I don't know if anyone remembers this particular news item. It was very well addressed, at least at Multiling at our center. We got involved in the public debate. So let's look at the Norwegian reality. This newspaper article draws attention to a disturbing finding. The fact that it's, I'll translate here, you can read in Norwegian otherwise. Almost all Norwegian Pakistani children are born in Norway, second generation, as I said. Most of them nevertheless know Norwegian too poorly to follow the regular teaching in schools. Now, that this situation is not a problem as such, because the Educational Act, Opplæringsloven, has particular things that can be done to assist this group of children. And however, if we look back to what and how the politicians today are currently reacting, here we see a very popular Labour Party politician who came out at that time when this news article made a big splash in the Norwegian media. Now it's going to be a little over 4 years ago. He comes out and says, parents should speak Norwegian with their children. Okay, you have politicians, experts coming in from the outside, going into the private space of the family, telling families what they should do. If we go even further, there were even political threats, and we've heard this today. I don't need to go into detail. Those of you who know the Norwegian media debate understand this, this particular news item. There are other prominent politicians that recommended drastic measures to improve the situation. And here you see, for example, teach your children Norwegian or lose aid, force kindergarten if poor Norwegian, deny children's TV from the home country, cut aid to parents refuse. And what I like about this is not online media, but still it's the media open to the public. And what is especially interesting that reflects an important dimension here is up in the top right, you see that? It says in Norwegian, slik blir du svensk. And this is how you become Swedish. So becoming Swedish is okay, right? But not having another type of background is okay. So that's an interesting, and here where it's sort of addressing those with a Pakistani background, immigrant families become Norwegian, right? Some families, however, did react, as we see here. You see that they somewhat negotiate the space. They're saying here, a young woman with an Urdu speaker saying you can't force people to send their children to preschool or take away their benefits. She said she was actually quite offended. And she points out that in fact her son quickly learned Norwegian. So sort of rejecting this stereotype that's made that all these children that have this immigrant background, they fall through the holes, so to speak. So there are in fact some children who do manage well. Here we have another follow-up that came in sort of the wake of that debate. And here we see a prominent politician next to the Minister of Children the headline says, wants to force Norwegian weak children to preschool. The Minister of Children asks Barnevernet, which is the child welfare services, to intervene against lack of Norwegian language skills. Now, this notion, Barnevernet, which is very interesting, the child welfare services, and there was a particular case also involving a family, a transnational family. I don't have time to go into the details, but this triggered international attention to Norway and to the child welfare services. And as you see in VG, there was a big article about mass demonstrations against the Norwegian child welfare services in 19 countries. And there you see King Harald, do not let Barnevernet rule over Norway. Norway, stop child kidnapping. So you can see this notion of child welfare services. And if you go into the media, what's very interesting, we're doing a media studies study on this, and you see that there are it's amazing the number of articles that are in that address this particular issue, and how this notion of child welfare services becomes part of the psyche of immigrant families, but also children. And some children were interviewed, and it's really horrifying. They thought the child welfare services were pedophiles, and they were scared in order to be addressed by, to have the child welfare services to come and take care of them. So there's a whole lots of attitudes around the child welfare services, who are, to give them some defense, they have a mandate, a very important mandate, to make sure the child is taken care of. And of course the problem is the child welfare services has taushetsplikt. I mean, they cannot talk about individual cases. So in the media you only hear the other side of the story. But here was interesting, a Polish journalist, come back to the fact that the Poles are the largest group, he did an investigation of attitudes in Poland towards Norway, and he noticed that all of those before going to Norway, or some of those who had come home, had ideas and brought up the child welfare services. And he outlined some of the things they say, and this is why the Norwegian Barnevernet is distrusted in Poland, he says. And these are some quotes. He says that people believe that authorities own the children in Norway, or that Barnevernet has a certain number of Polish children they're supposed to confiscate. And some say that Norway steals blonde Slavic children. Some people say it's a legacy from the Viking period. So you see how this can be a challenge for transnational parents wanting to raise their children, or even bringing their children to Norway. So let's go quickly then, I have a few minutes left, this other notion of that points out that the family has become a public space. And that is with online parental blogging. There are many, if anyone has taken a look, there are many multilingual parental blogs, more or less, how do you make your children bilingual? How do you make your children multilingual? It's almost like a recipes in a sense. And many of them, of course, anchor themselves in the literature about how to do this. Some of them are self-proclaimed experts, but there's a whole mass of literature out there for young parents, for young mothers. Especially, it turns out that mostly mothers address themselves to these sites, seem to seek those who do have children, or at least those who are planning to have children. Now, the online business is something fairly new, of course, but there's a historical root. There's always been some how-to literature for parents, how to raise bilingual children. They used to be the Bilingual Family newsletter, and there were books, and there still are books that are coming out. And Kellie pointed out some books too about becoming good parents or doing parenting. And there are many online resources, the media of parenting websites, online discussion forums, blogs, email, mobile phones and message and video services, and the newer technologies of social media and apps. And mommy blogging, as a specific type of social media usage, is a common and growing phenomenon. And many transnational parents are referring to that. There are a variety of blogs. Here you can see some of the big questions that come up. And here you even see, have you failed at raising a bilingual child? So you see parenting or bilingual children is really under scrutiny in these blogs. And here a little bit of from the research on the family online, blogging the self. And I love this term, sharenting. So it's sharing parenting online and sharing representations of one's parenting or children online. And this comes from a recent article in the Journal of Popular Communication, Sharenting, Parent Blogging, and the Boundaries of the Digital Self. And here we see how parents define the borders of their digital selves and justify what is their story to tell. As it says here, bloggers grapple with profound ethical dilemmas because in one way they're representing themselves, their identities as parents, but at the same time they're bringing their parenthood, their parenting to the public, right? And they're bringing their children's lives to the public because lots of these online parenting blogs talk about their own experience with raising children. And at the same time, that's one of their big responsibilities is to protect their children from the public. So you can see there's a paradox there. So there is intensive parenting in the digital age, and late modernity transforms identity, our identity as a parent, for example, from a given, something that's given you by the fact that you have children, into a task, doing parenting, and charging the actors with the responsibility for performing that task and for the consequences and also the side effects of their performance. So the identity of the parent becomes a task to perform. And parental blogging shows us then that late modernity is transforming the conditions for such performances, ever more digital, visible, and scrutinized. So by bringing this up with the parental parenting is just to show that transnational families or transnational parents also face challenges in a sense once they have chosen to have children, is how to be a good transnational mom or a transnational dad. One slide that I cut out, but I should have perhaps kept it, I can ask is, are parental blogs weird? And weird, weird, strange. And actually it's an acronym for white, educational, from, industrialized, rich, democratic society. Exactly. And perhaps there is sort of a slant in a sense of those who consult, but that's an empirical question, of course. So then, summing up, challenges for transnational parents in contemporary globalized society, the family has become highly politicized, at the target of social politics, cultural interventions, and proposed or forced measures of integration, as we saw with the politicians here in Norway, thus potentially having their well-being threatened both at home and generally in society. And increasing pressure on parents to perform parenting. Parents and other caregivers in transnational families employ online media to address and investigate issues of language and culture transmission, well-being, and good parenting in their integration or into their integration in society. And we can say essentially then that the parent has become a public space today, and that is the big challenge for all parents, for all families. Thank you very much.
Speakers. I would like to now open the floor to questions, suggestions, concerns, thoughts.
I would just like to say first that when I saw the word sharenting is that I thought it's the idea of reborn of the idea that it takes a village to raise a child.
That's interesting.
I thought, I thought it's about sharing parenthood, but then I read the description and I was wrong, and I wanted to say to you, Kellie, that when you said about you're just a mother, it's quite upsetting because before becoming mothers, we are being told that this is the reason of the essence of our lives. And this is the only thing that matters as females. And then when we become mothers, we are being told you're just a mother, just it. Why you are giving up on yourself? So it's the double messages that we need to face all the time. It's just that.
I think it's interesting to think about motherhood as this intersubjective relationship.
Yeah, and
But I'm also thinking about the task to perform parenthood, and also how the pressure on parents, I feel, also is society's pressure on the children, what they are supposed to perform. And as we are now full-time working mothers and fathers, and the kids are in school or preschool between 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and how school functions, the pressures our time together, and the old-fashioned idea of homework, for instance, that then has to be done the 2-3 hours we're together in the afternoon. All these things adds to this pressure that we have as parents to perform well for society, for school, you know. Yeah, you understand that.
I think that's very important, the way you pointed out, is this notion of performance. And there is a performance that's being judged all the time. And to what extent parents are aware of it, I think we do feel the pressure.
Yeah, and actually performing as a family,
As a perform, yeah.
kids and parents together. If we together are able to collaborate well enough to produce the result we're supposed to in relation to education. And that's a social pressure amongst parents as well.
Yeah, I also read about motherhood being this competitive sport also, which I think comes into this too. It's nowadays people are saying, my child is doing this and my child can do that and that, and it's almost this, well, my kid is better than your kid, so I'm the better parent or I'm the better mother because I invest so much time and energy and perhaps money for my kid to become this wonderful human being that's going to give back to society. But I mean, it's everywhere, the pressure, I think. Yeah.
It's not a question, it's more a comment, but we have this expression in Norwegian saying kvinna er kvinna best. And when I'm listening to you, I wonder if
So what does it mean for the
the
woman is a woman's worst enemy in a way.
Women are women's worst enemy. And I'm wondering if we're creating a society that actually makes more women regret motherhood. I don't know, but maybe we are, because I sense it's such a polarized discourse in society about. Even politicians say that if you don't choose to be this multitasking, juggling woman, full-time work, you're actually failing. We look down on you. We don't like you because you're not giving back to society, so to speak. And so women are not actually given the options of choosing. Maybe I do want to be a mother, but I don't want all the other things. I don't want to be this juggling mother. Or maybe I just want the other part. I don't want the children. And either way, you're just failing because you're actually just given one option to be that superwoman up there. And I think that must be really, really hard. And I think that makes more women maybe regret because they can't fulfill that position in a way. And sometimes when I'm around I work in the cross-cultural field, and when I meet families of a more collectivistic society background, they seem more relaxed about the idea that I'm not the only one who's going to shape this child. So when my Somalian friend had her children, it was like, oh, here she comes, put her in whatever bedroom is, whatever bed is ready. It's not these color coordinated ideas, and it's not so much a task. It's just a baby coming, and everybody takes part, and she puts it in my lap, and she says, I'm too tired. So she acknowledges it's one too many, I shouldn't have had it, but they just come, and she loves it. But somehow there's something we lose in the individualistic society. We're trying to be more free, but we're actually pushing ourselves into the same. Sorry, that was a long comment.
I think it's just the beginning of the study about regretting motherhood. It was not studied enough yet. We don't have enough voices of women in the past in order to know if nowadays more women are regret, because we don't know so many times how women felt in other centuries. We don't. Their voices are not that documented in general, and not of mothers in particular. So we can't compare. But I think that I totally understand what you're saying, and I think it's really important to learn more about it. The one thing that I think that we need to be careful about it's not going back to the same assumption that if only society will let us be and will not interrupt us in being mothers, all of the women are feeling fit to and wanting to be mothers, because that might be another round of going back to the essential assumption that if only we will be left on our own and society will not put all the pressure and check us all the time, and we will be under the eye of society, then there will not be regret because we are female and we are up to motherhood, and we are happy if without society. So I'm not sure if I'm understood with my English, but it might be going back to the same essential trap of female and motherhood, as if it is the same. Is it understandable?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I just commented shortly.
Yeah.
I think my thought was that we're not opening up to more options. We're going back, or we're just making a new trap. We're not opening up to several options where you can, where some mothers could say, I can't stay at home for a whole year. That would make me a terrible mother. Send me back to work and I'll be a good mother. Other people would need to say, I really can't work because I can't take both roles. And both is okay. I think we're still not there where women can shamelessly choose whatever they want.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not a parent myself, so I have not experienced parenthood. But I'm appreciating what is being said about the pressure from society on parents to perform so well, and that there are so many expectations. But then again, I wonder if, is it really the case? Is it that bad, or is it basically the media which makes us believe that pressure is so tough or so hard? Is it because I have lots of friends and sisters, family members with children, and I don't really see in the private interaction between parents that this is such a heavy topic. It's, to me it seems, but I might be wrong. That's this is sort of a comment and a question. To me it seems like it is the media that is sort of constructing this extreme pressure that everybody is in the tidsklemma all the time. But in reality, it seems like people and parents actually do manage to survive, or they do their parenting in their own way, the way they feel fits their life. But this is a question and a comment, so you please respond.
Does any of the speakers have something to say about it?
I think the media plays a huge role in it, and also these books, right, that are constantly feeding us with this is how you can do it, this is how you should do it. But it's hard, and I think what you were also saying, it doesn't matter, I think, what you do as a woman nowadays, whether you stay at home, whether you work part-time, whether you work full-time. whatever we end up doing, it's somehow wrong. It's not working. So we can pick, but
Who
it's still...
says it is wrong?
Well, a lot of people in society are saying, we get judged all the time. I get judged usually when I say to people, oh, I work here. Oh, so you and your family moved here? I say, no. My family is in Austria. I work here. What? Oh, that must be so hard. I say, no, actually, it's not. It was in the beginning, but I quite like it. This shocks them. This is not the answer that they want to hear. They want me to be this self-sacrificing martyr mother, and I'm not. And I'm not going to feel guilty for it. But people make you feel, they try to make you feel guilty. I don't know why. I don't know why people do this. It's me. But
it's probably not conscious. I mean, I guess they don't do it to be evil, but it's just sort of an automatic or
yeah.
Reaction, don't you think?
I don't know, but what I like about it is they're all shocked. I've never met anybody that said, oh, good for you. You know, sometimes people say it after you explain to them the situation, but at first they are quite shocked. And this is coming from both women, men. Yeah. But I think the media, to come back to your point, I think the media plays a huge role, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Kellie, you also had a suggestion?
Well, I had a question about, or I want to know why women regret having kids. I think a lot of people might have that same question.
And I wanted to ask, do women in Norway are being pressured into motherhood? Because I come from Israel, and in Israel there is no option other than becoming a mother, and the average is the highest of the OECD. It's like 3.1 children. This is the average, in Israel. And so later, because it's really interesting for me to, I think me and Christina started to write each other about it, about there is a pressure in Norway. So if we will have a chance to talk about it, I will be really grateful. And the women who participated in my study, many of them say that they just later on learned that it was not for them the responsibility, the non-ending responsibility, like once a mother, always a mother. Also when you are a grandmother, it never ends. And taking care, they talked about consciousness motherhood. This is my title to it, but they said, many of them said about, it's always there. No matter what, you are always somebody's mom. You cannot be in the world without the notion of taking care of or feeling responsible for someone else. And it's not like a partner, like a romantic partner. It's like it's a different kind of relationship. And we will not find a dramatic, tragic stories in their families. It's not this, it's like, it's really simple. It's just women who understood it's not for them. But we cannot, I'm not, they are not, if we will follow their stories, we will not find stories of a tragic or a horrifying children, like monster children who ruined their lives. It's something important to say. Most, if not all of them, said something like, this is the generic expression, I love my children, I hate being their mother. Okay, so they love their children as human beings, who they are. They think they might be quite terrific and smart or good enough children, but they hate being in the certain position in the relationship with them. And this is the thing. Yeah.
I mean, it's a 24-hour
question here.
Well, it's just a comment to you because, yes, of course, it's media pressure, but media pressure creates reality. So you can't just say that, oh, that's the media. The media creates our reality. It creates our perception of things. So if there's a pressure in media, it becomes a pressure in your real. And I live with kids and parents, and I totally feel the pressure, like you're saying, of competition, of whose child is best as this and that. And you actually need to have a certain income in order to be able to drive them around to different courses of this and that. And if your kid is not in a course, what's wrong. I mean, there is lots of pressure in all directions, and I think just to mention also the father. With your example, my brother, who then is Norwegian and lives here, took half of the paternity leave, 50%, and was met with the same shock. Like, how on earth is that possible? And again, I think we live in a society where, the level of success that's expected from all of us, work, mother, whatever we do, is too high, and the idea of what we're supposed to produce in a day, I think, is too high.
It is possible to oppose it, isn't it?
Huh?
It is possible to oppose it or to resist.
But you have to be strong to do that.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean.
Just some quick comments. So about the role of the media, of course the media construct a reality, but also where does it come, the content that is in the media? It still comes from society. So there is this circular relationship between society and the media, and the reinforcement perhaps that the media provides on what is already in society. And then I think it's very interesting how many of these attitudes are unconscious. Like, for example, you were saying people make you feel guilty, they don't do it on purpose. Not they don't want to make you feel guilty, but that is what is ingrained into us. So the standard of normality. And so that is what is very difficult to deconstruct. As you say, this idea that it's because you're female, you have to wish for a child. So when you assume that something is normal, how do you question it? How do you construct it? How do you even see it that it's not really normal? And for me, not only, I thought your presentation was really great because of the political and social implications of this. For me, it's not only that there is this assumption that as a female you want to have a child necessarily, but also that you can. And for example, in my case, I don't have children. And actually, I share with you the fact I've never really wanted to have a child. And so also people don't understand why am I so upset about it then. Well, because for me, having a child would have had other significance in terms of duty for my own family, in terms of the relationship with my husband. But then that for me was the greatest shock, the fact that I found out that my body somehow didn't do it. And when it's so expected, they tell you, oh, when you'll be a mother, you'll understand, when you'll be a mother. So you have this idea for 40 years, in the back of your mind, since you were a small child, that, yeah, one day I'll be a mom, one day I'll be a mom, even if you don't want it, but that idea is there. And when it doesn't happen, it's this, I don't know if it makes sense to you if you haven't gone through this, but it's this kind of huge shock. And suddenly you realize I've lived in this world. I thought I knew how it worked, and somehow everything is falling apart. And that is that amount of shock, really, that makes you upset.
There was a comment or...
I was going to add to the comments and questions about the cross-cultural elements and the different norms in different societies, coming from the US and having lived several years in Mexico and then arriving here in Norway to work. I found the environment in Norway to be very different towards families than it is in the US. As Kellie mentioned, places where having a kid, even thinking about having a kid, would be out of the question in a professional setting and hasn't thus been on my agenda for a while. And coming to Norway where everyone is suddenly like, what? Where's your family? Where's your ring? Where's your children? And oh, of course, the people with kids leave early. Of course they come in late, and that's fine. So Norway actually has reminded me a lot of Mexico rather than the US in terms of their expectations about how women will be in society. But that's my outsider's view, having been here for a year or so.
Where to start? I myself do not have children, basically out of circumstance, not of choice. And I recognize a lot of what has been talked about. And I think, yes, it's about underlying norms that shape the attitudes and it's unconscious. And I also meet so many, unconscious questions that are being posed to me all the time. And I totally agree with your reflection on this. You're just a mother, the paradox that you're either just a mother or you're literally a nobody. And that's interesting, I think. And I feel a lot of sentiments like they feel sorry for you, and they come up with different explanations, like, oh, like when they realize you don't have children, oh, so, well, at least you've had an interesting career, or at least you have nephews and nieces that are still small. Okay. A lot of assumptions really sort of put in you. So I think, yes, there is a strong pressure in Norway. It's strange. I've lived abroad quite a lot in other societies, and I've been really struck by coming back home. It's very sort of intense, very traditional, and very political as well. Because I think there's a social and very strong political pressure. We have in Norway what we call, the state feminism. We're very proud in Norway that we moved a long way in terms of creating good measures for women to have children, or for family life, that you can do both, you can work, you can become a parent and all that. But it's also an obligation to do all that, to be that, super mom, because you have to create a family, because we have low birth indexes and all that. So I found that also very strange to realize that there is it's almost, I've failed on my social duty to contribute to this, to the growth of the population. And I also work on integration issues, and I find it quite interesting to then observe also the political debate about how to close the borders. We do not want more children or more people with big families from the countries that create big families, and I think that's very interesting as well as a deep sort of racist issues underlying the integration debate, whilst at the same time we're expected to produce or have a family and have more children. So a lot of sort of different thoughts. But yes, there's a strong pressure in Norway, I think, definitely.
Are there any other questions?
Christina, you said about choosing childlessness and not choosing childlessness. Certainly, people who've been abused in childhood sometimes choose not to become parents. There's a belief that actually they may continue the abuse generationally, so that's may well be an early decision to choose childlessness.
Can I just say that I'm not saying that people don't choose to be without children, because they do. I know that they exist. But what I'm saying is that there is an impression, because perhaps their voices are overrepresented in the media, that whoever doesn't have children, it's because they've chosen it. When in fact, I think from the figures I've seen, and I might be wrong and the figures might be contested, I think the majority of the people without children have not in fact chosen it explicitly. But these people totally exist, I know they do. And I might be one of them who, it's so ambivalent. So I think I might be one of them. That's why.
And I do agree with your figures about childless by circumstance, and that changes over the life course as well.
Exactly,
Often people just think about the fertility period, but actually there's a whole organic interaction within that time span, that people change their position on their fertility intentions all the way through. So at one point they've chosen childlessness, and other times it's childless by circumstance. And Elizabeth, in the UK there's a lot of work around dementia at the moment, and one of the current narratives is being bilingual is a preventative around dementia. So you might well find that coming into your social media soon, actually as a long-term preventive, as a health measure.
Definitely, you see that on the online blogs. It's one of the promotions. Start early with the children, because in the long range, at the end of their life, they'll get 4 more years, because research has shown that dementia will postpone the symptoms. Oh no, that bilingualism will postpone the symptoms of dementia. That being said, it's a hotly contested finding.
But it's very interesting also what you're saying about this is going to help later on in life, which goes back to this idea of the linear time. It's almost like our whole life is being planned out. So there are certain ways we're expected to do to live our lives, and certain things we are supposed to do at certain times in a certain way. And so, so somehow we are losing this idea of the unpredictability of life, which is in fact the norm. So are we in fact setting all ourselves up for failure, and so to be dissatisfied with our lives?
Yes. The answer is yes. Short answer.
Sorry. Richard, a really interesting talk, really. And I like your thing about silence. And I'd like to ask you about structured silence. How structures silence people. There was an article by Goldberg, well back in the 1970s, Goldberg was someone, and they were looking, actually promoting bringing fathers onto the maternity unit, and the resistance, the structural resistance about doing that was really incredible. So, called the Midwife has jumped a decade or two in bringing that in, possibly. I've got PDFs of that article if you want.
Yeah, no, I've not. So structural resistance generally in institutions.
Institutionally,
yeah. Yeah, in all of these discussions, there's this sort of very clear paradox between sort of representations that everyone is subject to, and that most of us seem to be aware of consuming. So Hilda was talking about, who the media is presenting this to us, and we don't have to accept it, but there is a general consumption of these kind of images. So we sustain the structures that are already in place. In some cases voluntarily, some cases involuntary. Talking about your experiences coming to Norway and the working day and how that changes, and having been a head of a department, and hearing colleagues coming and saying, it's just not fair that my colleagues who have children leave early and start late. Why am I being discriminated against because I don't have a family? Why should I be the one having to be there on a Saturday doing open days because I don't have children to look after? So there are those sort of structures that are very difficult to resist around this. So yeah, I would be interested to see what you're talking about, because I don't see an obvious way to respond to the kind of structural questions that there are there around this.
Sorry about that question, Richard.
No, it's fine. No,
Richard in trouble, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a comment. I think this is very, very complicated. Extremely complicated. About the anticipated pressure from society on us to provide society with children. Yes, it's definitely there at a certain level, but then again, I wonder if some of it is also a construction in our own minds. I mean, I'm childless also, but it's involuntary. I wanted children very, very badly. So I guess I have a different standpoint. I mean, my story is different from the ones who chose not to be mothers or regret motherhood. So I can't really identify with the expectations and sort of the sanctions in a way towards you when you do not have children. I have never experienced that, but I do see that it's there. But I also wonder how much is actually there, and how much is inside our how much is just mental construction that we might be able to fight against.
Interesting.
Because we all, I mean, when we interact with people, we always have expectations, right? I mean, I believe that she expects this from me, but maybe she doesn't. Maybe you're actually wrong. So, but of course, it is a reality. It is a fact. The media bombards us with all these expectations, and and all these thoughts about the happy, lucky family. But then again, it's so much more. I mean, Norway is a wonderful welfare society at many levels. It's also a bad welfare society for the time being. But I mean, it's so much in our society. The Nordic welfare society is constructed to assist women in being independent, managing their lives by themselves, and not necessarily have a child. I mean, we were able to make a career. We were able to do a lot. So I don't know. I think this is very complicated. I just want to say that I think parts of this might be our own construction.
It was just I don't want to change the topic. It was just that there is also a counter narrative that, and certainly this is, I don't know if Rob has heard it, but in the UK, in the sense that actually there are positive advantages to society for fewer people having children. And we live on a relatively small island that's getting more and more populated, so there's this narrative that Britain is full, we don't necessarily need more children, and certainly I've heard a number of people say, well, this is bad for the environment, and people say, you're hypermobile, Kellie, so you're flying about all over the place, but actually the worst thing you do rather than flying anywhere is having children in the environment. So there are these sort of counter narratives. It's not, so I don't know whether this is just a sort of UK thing or whether you hear this, you seem to be saying that there's an echo in Norway as well, but there's an environmental advantage not to having children, that actually some percentage which is irresponsible for the environment to have more children.
Yeah.
Did you have something?
Just a brief comment. I think it's not an either or. I think yes, of course there's space, and there's a lot of people in Norway who will support and will, feel strong in the position of not having children, whether you chose it or not, and feel support for that. But I think there is also the pressure. It's definitely there because it's experienced not only by me but a lot of other people I know or talk to, and I think it coexists, and it's complicated.
Also about this point, and I ask myself very often, in fact, am I seeing some kind of exclusion? So that is not really there. It's just because I feel excluded that then everything seems to exclude me. But then I do think that Norway is extremely strongly designed around family, especially public life. So if you don't have children, you are effectively cut out, and this is a fact. Because I see it, I'm an extreme case. I'm a childless researcher who comes in from abroad and doesn't have any family connection in Norway. But because my case is so extreme, I can also see the immediate consequences of not having children. Because other researchers in my exact position come with children, they come to Norway and they don't know anyone, but they plug through their children into whole networks of school, other parents. So immediately they have this extended network. Okay, they don't know them very well, but then they do things together, so they get to know them quite quickly. Well, after 2 years and a half, I know you, one of my only friends almost, and then all the other people. I'm not joking. I've got amazing colleagues, but I don't see them outside the job because they all have families. So, that is, I think, the experience of being childless. Has so many implications, and I will talk about this in my presentation, that are hidden. And so it seems like, you just don't have children, but you get on with your life. Yes, but getting on with my life is actually more difficult, I believe, than for families, because society is designed for them and not for me. And plus on the job you're expected to do things because you're supposed to have all the time in the world. You're not looking after children. Well, sometimes I need to look after my health because of all this that I'm experiencing. So I need time for myself, in fact. And I could mention the portions in the supermarket. Like they are designed for families. Even I can mention when I go shopping and have big bags and I'm walking along the pavements and there are two mothers talking to each other, they occupy the whole pavement. And I would expect, okay, I move a little bit, you move a little bit. No, they just move. And it's really just this sense of entitlement they come with. So it's really this kind of tiny microscopic interactions every day that really they leave you like, okay, it seems like you are more important than me.